Today, so it's time for a study group time. So for those of you barely tuning in, you probably think that I'm doing readings. I'm not. Excuse me, I'm just doing study groups. So basically we're going to be reading A Course in Miracles, the complete and annotated version or edition by Helen Schumann, who channeled the information, I think it was like in the 70s or 60s. It was like way back then. It might be the early 80s because I'm thinking it's around that time frame. Anyways, it's a really great book, and it talks about, in the book, what she's doing is, and it's a really big book too. I'm just doing the e-version just because it's easier for the light to hit me so I don't have to turn on my big lights. But what she did was she essentially was channeling, apparently who she believes was Jesus, and she was having conversations with Jesus, and she was channeling the information, and they were having long dialogues, and she wrote about it. And the book that's become popular is A Course in Miracles, which is a traditional like blue book that's like this thick, but it doesn't have all her notes, and the one that's the most popular was really edited. So we've been focusing on the original version with all her notes because there's a lot of stuff there that she didn't really discuss that is important to know when you're reading the material itself. But she uses the filter or perspective, and I say filter because everything that we experience in life goes through a filter, right? She uses the perspective of religion or of Catholicism to describe or to explain some of the stuff that she's being communicated with as far as her conversations with Jesus are concerned. So there's a lot of traditional language that has to do with religion, even though it's actually not a religious book. It's more of a spiritual book, but it's really interesting. So don't get discouraged by the language itself because it can get a little tricky as well. So I'm going to go through and read some things, and then I'm going to stop if I need to comment on something or just break something down because it might be a little bit harder to make sense of, and then we'll keep going, okay? All right, so let's start with it. So I'm on, what is this? What page is this? This is page 67 of 1,946. That's how many pages. We're just on 67. But it's been a process, right? But this is like, I'm dedicated to the process and how long it's going to take. But we are on page 67, section 3. It's the proper use of denial. That's the section that we're reading. Okay, so when you are afraid of anything, you are acknowledging its power to hurt you. Remember that where your heart is, there is your treasure also. This means that you believe in what you value. If you are afraid, you are valuing wrongly. Human understanding will inevitably value wrongly, and by endowing all human thoughts with equal power, will inevitably destroy peace. That is why the Bible speaks of the peace of God, which is passeth human understanding. This peace is totally incapable of being shaken by human errors of any kind. It denies the ability of anything which is not of God to affect you in any way. This is the proper use of denial. It is not used to hide anything, but it is used to correct error. It brings all error into the light, and since the same, it abolishes error automatically. True denial is a very powerful protective device. You can and should deny any belief that error can hurt you. This kind of denial is not a concealment device, but a correction device. The right mind of the mentally healthy depends on it. You can do anything I ask. I have asked you to perform miracles and have made it very clear that these are natural, corrective, healing, and universal. There is nothing good they cannot do, but they cannot be performed in the spirit of doubt. You have asked yourself why you cannot really incorporate my words, but remember my own question before you ask yours. O thou of little faith, O thou of little faith, wherefore this thou doubt? The idea of cannibalism, okay, that's a big jump to make. The idea of cannibalism in connection with the sacrament is a reflection of a distorted view of sharing. I told you before that the word thirst in connection with the Spirit was used because of the limited understanding of those whom I spoke. I also told you not to use it. The same holds for expressions like feeding on symbiosis is misunderstood by the mentally ill who do use it in that way. But I also told you that you must recognize your total dependence on God, a statement which you may not have liked. God and the sons he created are symbiotically related. They are completely dependent on each other. The creation of the Son himself has already been perfectly accomplished, but the creation by sons has not. God created sons so he could depend on them because he created them perfectly. He gave them his peace so they would not be shaken and would be unable to be deceived. Whenever you are afraid, you are deceived. Your mind is not serving your soul. This literally starves the soul by denying its daily bread. In this connection, this is a poem about Holy Family that says, where tricks of word are never said, and mercy is as plain as bread. God offers only mercy. Your own words should always reflect only mercy, because that is what you have received and that is what you should give. Justice is a temporary expedient or an attempt to teach you the meaning of mercy. Its judgmental side arises only because you are capable of injustice, if that is what your mind makes. You are afraid of God's will because you have used your own will, which he created in the likeness of his own, to miscreate. What you do not realize is that the mind can miscreate only when it is not free. An imprisoned mind is not free by definition. It is possessed or held back by itself. Its will is therefore limited and not free to assert itself. It is all right to remember the past, provided you also remember that anything you suffer is because of your own errors. As an analogy, imagine a very young child who falls down the stairs when an adult has her arms open in welcome at the bottom of the stairs, and who then develops a totally unwarranted fear of that adult. The misstep which causes the child's fall has nothing at all to do with the adult, just as your own missteps have nothing at all to do with me. Denial of error is a very powerful defense of truth. We have slowly been shifting the emphasis from the negative to the positive use of denial. Remember, we have already stated that denial is not a purely negative device. It results in positive miscreation. That is the way the mentally ill do employ it. But remember this thought: never underestimate the power of denial. In the service of the right mind, the denial of error frees the mind and reestablishes the freedom of the will. When the will is really free, it cannot miscreate because it recognizes only truth. I'm going to stop there for a second because there's a lot to kind of talk about. First, I want to talk about what she's talking about when she's talking about the idea of denial, meaning that it is this method of refuting or of essentially not ignoring, but just choosing not to give something space. In other words, we go through our day, we go through our life, and we are constantly engaging with the world. We have a relationship with life. We have a relationship with circumstances. And everything that we experience here is always within the confines of the human condition, to where everything is based in an element of lack, scarcity, and fear. That is the human condition. The human condition is a state of suffering. We all come here to use the human condition for our own soul's advancement. So when we come here, we're basically dealing with circumstances and conditions that do not necessarily affect us when we're in our true state, which is in our soul state, our spirit state, our high state. That only exists here. We only have to deal with that drama here. So when we are experiencing things and interacting with the world and with people, etc., we do not have to choose to accept what is being shared with us or what is being given to us. Meaning that, for example, if someone is attempting to send me a negative thought, a negative intent, someone's trying to share it with me in a negative way, you do not have to give that space. You don't have to acknowledge or allow that as your reality, as your experience here. Granted, there are times where it's going to be kind of hard to ignore, because if someone's coming at you with a bat, it's going to be hard to ignore or to deny that. But what I'm talking about is the exchange of energy, the exchange of intent, the exchange of co-creative ability with other humans and with other experiences, etc. Here's an example of this. So When I began to work on my relationship with money, my relationship with prosperity, etc., I came from the hood. I came from a place where things were scarce. There was a built-in sense of lack that came along with being born into that scenario, into that situation. And I always had the same, I maintained and I sustained the same mindset and the same perspective that I was conditioned and raised within. So all of my mother's, thoughts and fears and worries, all was raised and born around who did not have money either, who had to be very conscious of spending, etc. Those were my those were my teachings. Those were my teachings of lack, my teachings of fear, my teachings of scarcity. I was taught that. As I got older and as I began to explore spirituality, as I began to explore our connection with Source, who we really are in this form, being Source in form, and understanding that the reality and authentic nature of our being is one of prosperity, it's one of completion, it's one of there is no lack in that state. There is nothing missing from that state. It's all just kind of there, and it's complete and available to us. And that's the problem when you're dealing with a perfect state, which you call it the heavenly state. You don't really have the opportunity to experience anything other than that. And to some extent, on a soul level, it can get boring, which is why we come here, because it's an opportunity to kind of participate in something that can get us to understand things in different ways, unique ways, or get us to experience things that would be useful for us on a soul level. And each of us on a soul level, it's not like each soul has everything, every piece of knowledge or information. It's not like every soul has all of the knowledge and the wisdom and the wholeness of God in one soul. That's not possible. We are all like little cells within the body of God, God being the grander being that exists in consciousness or in form, in that kind of form. If you use it as an example, so we're all cells within that grand body. So one cell can't be the embodiment of the grander, awareness or beingness or God, because it doesn't have the potential for that. But a cell can travel throughout the different systems of the body and understand things from that perspective. This is what we're doing. We're individually here in this form, traveling through the different systems and the different creations of form, of Source. And we're understanding ourselves through our relationship with all of these different parts of creation. So if I'm in this form and I'm dealing with human stuff, and knowing who I truly am, knowing what I truly am, we always get pulled back into the human drama, the human struggle. You can be the most enlightened person in existence. To some extent, you're still going to have to deal with some form of human suffering, even if it's having to wipe your own ass at the end of the day. You have to deal with some human condition because that's what we have to deal with here. And so with that being understood, knowing that we are automatically, authentically coming from a place of love and from a place of completion, this reality that we live in, of course, it is a kind of a hologram. It's a constructed platform and reality we all agree to on a soul level to support and sustain for the purpose of our own individual experience. When you awaken to your own truth, to the reality of who we are and what we're doing here, when you become aware of those truths, you have choices that you can make at that point, because you are a creator mimicking the creator. You're a replication. You're another representation. You're an example of the creator. And when we go forward into our lives, every single day with every single thing we do, we choose what to create. And so if I wake up one morning and I choose to create a more loving world or a more connected world, then I can do that in different ways through the work that I do. That is a choice. That's something that I'm choosing to experience. Even though, on a world level, there is still a lot of division. There's still a lot of things that separate us or that could separate us. And even though I've been drawn into that drama from time to time, I still hold it in my mind that I choose connection, that I choose love, that I choose cooperation, that I choose, unity for the purpose of all of us benefiting from that, right? But there's always going to be things to be divisive about. Just because we had to deal with, some crazy years right. Division has existed from the beginning of time. We're always, as humans, we're always going to have something that we can divide ourselves. We can divide ourselves over. But it depends on what you choose to focus your energy and intention on. And if I want to create a world that is more united, or if I want to work on unity or cooperation or love and sharing with people, then I have to still stay consistent to that intent. So even though there may be a lot of stuff going on the news, or even though there was a lot of stuff happening, there were a lot of days where I chose not to tune in or not to see what was happening or not to that drama, because my work and what I was focused on was more important to me than this temporary state that is happening. So I focus on that. And so that's me basically not dismissing, but denying that that's the whole reality and the only reality. That's me denying it. And